Hello. It is time for knowledge and social studies. We are on Unit 7 on Kings and Queens, Unit 3 or Lesson 3 called King Midas and the Golden Touch. Today's story, if we look at our globe, takes place in Greece right here, which is just north coast of the Mediterranean Sea, just west of Turkey. Do any of you have any knowledge of Greece or that area of the world? How many of you said that you do not know much information about Greece? Some of you might know a little, being that it is not in the United States, that you have to take a plane or a ship to get there. You are going to hear a story today from a very long time ago in Greece. Many years ago, people could not read books, so they told stories aloud to one another. People often made up stories to teach lessons. The crown in this picture is made up of gold and jewels. Jewelry, like necklaces or earrings, is often made of gold or materials that look like gold. Gold is a precious metal that is found inside of the earth. It is considered valuable because it costs a lot of money. In today's read aloud, the king loves gold more than anything in the world. So, who can answer the question, why would someone love gold most of all? Did you say because it's valuable? It costs a lot of money? Someone would love gold most of all because it is valuable. Sometimes people act very silly or foolish when it comes to things that cost a lot. You will hear a read aloud about a rich king who does something very foolish and learns a lesson from his foolish act. Listen to find out what lesson the king learns. Tell about what you see in this picture. Did you say a king? A king wearing a crown? A princess or young child or daughter? Once upon a time, there lived a very rich king whose name was Midas. Although King Midas lived long ago, he was very much like some of the people today. He was fond of gold. He loved gold more than anything in the world. When he gazed at the gold-colored clouds of a beautiful sunset, he would wish that the clouds were real gold. He looked at the clouds for a few moments, wishing they were real gold. If King Midas loved anything as much or more than he loved gold, it was his little daughter, who was named Marigold. When Marigold would run to meet him with a bunch of buttercups, King Midas would say, "Dear child, if these flowers were as golden as they look, they would be worth picking. Buttercups are yellow flowers." Every day, King Midas spent many hours locked away in a dark room in the basement of the palace. In this room, he stored his treasures. Treasures can be things that are worth a lot of money, like gold. He would go there and carefully lock the door behind him. Then he would take out bags of gold coins and pour the coins in piles and run his hands through them. As he did this, he would whisper to himself, "Oh, rich King Midas, what a happy man you are." But even as he said this, he felt that he was not quite as happy as he might be, for no matter how much he had, he always wanted more. One day, as King Midas was enjoying himself in his treasure room, he looked up and saw a strange young man who shone with a golden glow. King Midas knew that he had locked the door so that no one could get into the room. Yet here stood this man, and so King Midas thought the stranger must have some magic power. The stranger had a kind smile, so King Midas felt no fear. Then the stranger spoke to King Midas. "You are a rich man, King Midas," he said. "Yes, I have some gold," answered the king, "but it is not enough." "What?" cried the stranger. "You are not satisfied? You are not happy or content?" King Midas shook his head. "What would satisfy you?" asked the stranger. King Midas imagined one gold mountain heaped on top of another and another, yet still it seemed not enough. But then a bright idea occurred to him, and he said to the stranger, "I wish that everything I touched may turn to gold." "Touch is one of your five senses. What part of your body do you touch things?" Did you respond or say your hand or skin? The stranger smiled and said, "A golden touch. Are you quite sure you would be satisfied then?" "Yes, I would be perfectly happy and ask for nothing more," answered the king. "Then it shall be as you wish," said the stranger. "Tomorrow at sunrise you shall find yourself gifted with the golden touch." Then suddenly, with a great brightness, filled the room, causing King Midas to squeeze his eyes shut, and when he opened them, the stranger was gone. The next morning, when the sun had hardly peeped into his room, King Midas jumped out of bed. He touched a chair. It turned to gold. He touched the bed and a table, and they were changed to solid gold. He rushed to put on his shoes, and they turned to gold in his hands. What happens when King Midas touches things? Did you respond and say that they turn to gold? What does it mean to have the golden touch? Did you say that when King Midas touched anything with his hands, that it turned to gold? In great excitement, he opened the door and he ran outside to the garden. He saw many roses in full bloom. He went from bush to bush and touched each one until every flower, every leaf, and every bud was changed to gold. Now King Midas was hungry, so he returned to the palace for his breakfast. He lifted his cup of coffee and sipped it, but the instant the liquid touched his lips, it turned to gold. He tried to take a bite of a boiled egg, but it too turned to gold. "I don't quite see how I am to get any breakfast," said King Midas. "Can people eat gold?" Did you respond or say, "No, gold is a metal, hard, not food or consumable"? What problem did King Midas have with his breakfast? Did you tell Mrs. Johnston that whatever food he touched turned to gold, and therefore he couldn't eat it? Just then King Midas heard someone crying. He turned to see Marigold enter the room, crying as if her heart would break. In her hand, she held one of the roses that her father had changed to gold. "Why, my little lady," said King Midas, "what is there in this beautiful golden rose to make you cry?" "Dear father," Marigold answered, "it is not beautiful. It is the ugliest flower that ever grew. As soon as I was dressed this morning, I ran to the garden to gather roses for you. But what do you think has happened? All the beautiful, sweet-smelling roses have been spoiled." The word spoiled means ruined. Do you have any idea why Marigold thinks the rose is spoiled since it is now gold? Did some of you say because there's no smell? That it's not the same? It's hard instead of flowery and soft? "My dear little girl," said King Midas, who hated to see his daughter sad, "please don't cry." Then he bent down and kissed his child. "My precious Marigold," he said, but Marigold did not answer. Alas, what had he done? The moment King Midas' lips touched Marigold's head, her sweet, rosy face turned a glittering yellow color. Marigold was now a golden statue. King Midas cried out, wrung his hands, and wished that he were the poorest man in the world. If only he could have his daughter back again. What would King Midas rather hug, his daughter or a golden statue? Did you say his daughter? How do you know? Did you say that the story told us he cried out, he wrung his hands, wished that he was the poorest man? That all tells us that King Midas would rather hug his daughter. Then he noticed someone standing in the doorway. It was the young stranger who had appeared the day before in King Midas's treasure room. The stranger still shone with a soft glow, and he smiled as he asked the king, "Well, King Midas, how do you like your golden touch?" "I am very unhappy," said King Midas. "Unhappy?" asked the stranger. "But don't you have everything your heart desired?" "No," said King Midas. "Gold is not everything, and I have lost all that my heart really cared for." What did King Midas's heart really care for? Did you say his daughter? Then the stranger asked King Midas, "Which of these two things do you think is worth the most, the golden touch or your own little marigold?" "Oh, my child, my dear child," cried poor King Midas, "I would not give one hair off her head, even if you gave me the power to change this whole big earth into a solid lump of gold." Does King Midas still feel the same way about the golden touch as he did when he first asked the stranger for his power, or has he changed his mind? How many of you said he changed his mind? He does no longer want the power of touch. You are wiser than you were, King Midas, said the stranger. Go and plunge into the river that runs by your garden. The water will take away the golden touch. Then fill this pitcher with water and sprinkle everything you have touched. King Midas bowed low, and when he lifted his head, the shining stranger was gone. Then the king ran as fast as he could and jumped into the river. He filled the pitcher and ran back into the palace. The first thing he did was to sprinkle handfuls of water over the golden figure of little Marigold. The rosy color came back into her cheeks. She looked in surprise at her father, who was still throwing water on her. "Father, please stop!" she cried. "See if you have soaked my dress." King Midas took Marigold in his arms and kissed her. "Now I am truly happy," he said. "My dear child, you mean more to me than all the gold in the world." What lesson has King Midas learned? Did you say that he learned that his daughter was more precious than any gold, jewels, money in the world? Do you think that King Midas makes a wise or foolish choice in telling the stranger that he wants the golden touch? Did you say he makes a foolish choice? King Midas makes a foolish choice in wanting the golden touch because he almost lost someone he really loved. How do you know King Midas is a king? Did you tell Mrs. Johnston he has a crown, lives in a palace, wears a robe, has a lot of gold? Why does King Midas wish that everything he touched would turn to gold? Did you say he loves gold? He loves gold so much that he wants everything he touches to turn to gold. What does King Midas have a lot of, but wants more of? Did you say gold? King Midas wants more gold or treasures. What wish does the stranger grant King Midas? Did you say that the stranger grants King Midas the power of the golden touch? At first, how does King Midas feel about the golden touch? Did you say happy? Excited? At first, King Midas feels happy and excited because he loves gold so much. Do his feelings change? Yes. Yes, his feelings change because he couldn't eat, and his daughter became a golden statue. Is this story fiction, or could it really happen? How many of you said it could really happen? Some parts of the story could be real, including Midas could be a king who lived in Greece. He could have a daughter, and he could have lots of gold treasure. But some parts are fantasy or fiction, meaning that it's not real. That includes the magical appearance and disappearance of the stranger, the granting of the golden touch, and turning something into gold just by touching it. I hope you enjoyed our story today of King Midas and the golden touch.